Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham. Natalie is behind the scenes today, but she says hello to you. Great to have you with us wherever you're watching today. Thank you for joining us. We are the program that looks at Israel. We look at the news. We look at what's happening in Israel. We have features, and we also look at the Hebrew roots. And today in the studio, we have Rabbi Pesach Wolicki. Thank you so much for coming in today into the studio.
Thank you, Martin.
Rabbi Pesach Wolicki was born in the United States but raised in Canada. He made Aliyah to Israel in 1994, and it would be good that we can speak about that. He's an associate director and lecturer at the moment at the Center for Jewish Christian Understanding and Cooperation at Efrat. And it's a major organization in Israel which is building relations between the Jewish community and the Christian community. And I know that you're going to be very excited to hear from him today. He was previously the founder and head of a yeshiva in Bet Shemesh. He's written for Breaking News of Israel, Israel National News, Charisma News, and you live in Bet Shemesh with your wife Kate and your children. So thank you again for coming in and speaking to us on the program today. Thank you. And I know that one of the things that we always find very interesting is the story of the Jewish people coming back to the land of Israel. And to get personal, your own particular story, you're originally from the United States, so you lived in Canada, but then you made Aliyah, that is the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, in fulfillment of the Bible. So maybe you can tell us a bit about how that happened and
Sure.
how you ended up instead of being in Virginia, I think it was, and then coming across to live in Bet Shemesh.
Well, I grew up in an observant, in a religious Jewish home. My father is also a rabbi, and from the youngest age, we talked about how the future is in Israel, and that was very natural because in everything that we said in our prayers, it talked about one day being back in the land of Israel, every day in our daily prayers, in our Shabbat prayers on the weekend, and also in our studies when we would study the Bible and study all the traditional Jewish sources. It also talked about how the future is one day in Israel. So having those conversations at home as a child about how we're going to live in Israel one day. I remember playing with my siblings when we were little kids, and we would talk about when we grow up and when we're raising our kids and our kids playing with each other. It was always envisioned and talked about as in Israel. So, although I didn't make it to Israel until I was an adult, it was a very natural progression. I don't remember ever making a decision to move to Israel. Meaning it was always there as something that I'm going to be doing at some point.
Were you influenced by organizations like Nefesh Ben Nefesh?
Nefesh Ben Nefesh didn't exist yet. This is before Nefesh Ben Nefesh. Nefesh Ben Nefesh is an organization, I don't know if your viewers know, that assists Jews from all over the world to move to Israel. When I moved to Israel, Nefesh Ben Nefesh wasn't around yet, so it was a little bit harder in terms of the bureaucracy, but that's fine. Nothing compared with crossing the desert for 40 years.
Yeah, that's what I meant, because what a lot of our viewers might not know is that you have to uproot. The Jewish community in the States and is a settled community. It's not one that has had pogroms or gone through.
Right.
Well, obviously, there's been things happen over the years, but nothing as serious as in Russia, where whole communities had to uproot and come out of their natural homes. In the States, it's a settled Jewish community, and so to move, to give up your business, to move, to sell your home,
right,
and to move, it's quite a big thing.
It is. It's an interesting thing because in Israel today there are millions of Jews from all over the world, which itself, if we can just pause to think about it, when Moses, a few weeks before he dies, tells the people of Israel in Deuteronomy 29 and 30 that they'll be scattered to the four corners of the earth until, in the Hebrew, Hador Ha'acharon, until the end of the generations. And then, if they'll be scattered to the ends of the heaven, from there, the Lord God will gather you in. and that will come back to the land of Israel and become very prosperous. It's right there in Deuteronomy 30. And the fact that that's happened, meaning if you took anyone who knows the Bible, who knows that passage in the Bible from a few hundred years ago, or a few thousand years ago, or took one of the Jews who heard Moses say it and was probably thinking how unlikely that is. Many nations have been sent into exile, and especially if they're scattered, they're not even all sent to the same place. They're scattered around. They're very small in number, as Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 7 says that we're the smallest of nations. We have very small in number, scattered to the ends of the earth, and that we're going to come back after a long period of time at the end of the generations. It seems like an impossibility. The very fact that it happened, we should really appreciate the fact that this is miraculous fulfillment of prophecy. There's a line in the Talmud that says that the only person who doesn't recognize a miracle happening is the person that it happens to. So I think what that means is that because this has happened in our days, it just seems very normal to us. Oh, the people of Israel have returned from all over the world. There's millions of them here. But if you took someone who lived 1,000 years ago and showed them the modern state of Israel and showed them the millions of Jews from all different countries all over the world living in Israel in their own state, being very prosperous, there'd be no way to read those verses and not realize that this is exactly what is in Deuteronomy. So let's just appreciate that for a moment.
And it's very interesting because a lot of Christians who study prophecy and study the Bible, in 1967, when Jerusalem was again in the hands of the Jewish people, and the miracle of Jerusalem being back after all these years, the people were having meetings. There were groups of Christians meeting just to discuss, what is happening. We are seeing the Bible fulfilled in our lifetime. We're seeing what we read on Sunday in church. We're seeing this fulfilled in front of our very eyes, and it's just absolutely fantastic. Now, you came across from the United States. You moved across, I guess, with family. You moved your family across here.
Yeah.
And then you made the decision, or was that before, for the yeshiva, to start a yeshiva?
So, the decision was made around the time it was time to come. It was time to come back. We had very small children, and we wanted to make sure that they were raised in Israel. So we wanted to get back here before they were at an age that it would be more of an adjustment for them. And Jewish education was a passion. It still is a passion, and I, that was where the decision came from to start this yeshiva, which is a gap year program for students after secondary school, after high school, to come to Israel and study and tour around and learn Hebrew and get more connected to their homeland. This was something that I was passionate about. At the same time, I've always been very passionate about building bridges with the Christian community. In my earlier years, when I was involved with various pro-Israel political activities, I came into contact with Christians who were supportive of Israel and were engaging in that relationship, and it opened my eyes. And I realized that this is part of those prophecies of the end of times. The prophecies of the return of the people of Israel to the land of Israel don't stop there. When you look in the Bible and look at those prophecies, they're always accompanied by prophecies of the nations seeing that and coming to the land to seek God there, and coming to the house of prayer for all nations, and that the knowledge of God fills the entire earth like the waters cover the sea. The prophecies of the return of the people of Israel to the land of Israel, this has always been my perspective, those prophecies are not only about the people of Israel. They're about the whole world reaching a point of spiritual redemption and shared service of God, shoulder to shoulder, as Zephaniah says. So this was also a passion of mine.
Because it's quite interesting. You have the picture of yourself in the yeshiva, very for me a very traditional kind of yeshiva with the Jewish students. And then we have another picture of you giving out pies in a church setting somewhere in America, and all over a matter of a few years, going from that to that. So absolutely amazing, and working with the Christian community, and so maybe you tell us a bit about that, because not only do you work as an educator with the center in Efrat, but you also travel as well. So
I do. Much of our center's activity is in Efrat and Jerusalem, where we have dialogue with Christians who are visiting Israel. But we realized that the Christians who buy a plane ticket, who sign up for a tour, and those tours are not so cheap, and they get on a plane and come to Israel as part of a group, to a certain extent, they've already made steps to be a part of this process and a part of this bridge. It's important that we engage them and we speak to them, and I do that all the time. I'll be speaking tonight. I'll be speaking on next week to groups that are visiting Israel. But we also realize that there are many Christian communities and individual Christians who have not yet made that trip, or might not ever be able to make that trip, or who are it's just not part of their awareness to think about the land of Israel, the people of Israel, the relationship of Judaism and Christianity. And this underscored for us the importance of getting out there. So I travel on a regular basis, almost every month. I travel mostly to the United States and Canada, and I'll be there generally for about 10 days every month.
If you're watching in the United States or in Canada, they can contact you?
They can contact us at info@cjcuc.com. That's a lot shorter than saying the Center for Jewish Christian Understanding and Cooperation. cjcuc.com, info@cjcuc.com, and they can come into contact with us, and I'd be happy to go anywhere. I mean, it's very important work for us. I speak at churches. Lately we've been visiting. I've made a number of visits to some Christian college campuses, university campuses, to reach younger Christians. I recently spoke at a Christian music festival in South Dakota, so I was getting exposed to some interesting experiences. It was fun to be on stage at a rock concert, but this is where my passion is at this point. I realize that we have to have a historical perspective. Both Christians and Jews, I believe, are obligated at this point, where so many prophecies of the future are now for us present and even past. We're living in that age of the fulfillment of these prophecies that for thousands of years were the distant future. And now we look at them and they're facts on the ground. I believe that calls upon us, and that gives us a responsibility to be a part of that process, and to understand it, to walk it out, to live it, and to nurture that process, to be with that process. So,
is it? And do you think that because there's a lot of there's people at different levels understanding of Israel, but there's a lot of people who are at the stage of having Shabbat, even having Shabbat in their home or in their church, they'll have a Shabbat meal, and for the Feast of Tabernacles, celebrating for example, the Feast of Tabernacles, celebrating that. And have you coming across that as well?
Yeah, I come across it. People are at different stages of this relationship. A lot of it comes from Christians really taking the Old Testament, our Bible, taking that more seriously and really reading it carefully, and building a respect for the Jewish people. There are, of course, differences. There are differences there are certain beliefs that we have as Jews that Christians don't have. There's beliefs that Christians have that Jews don't have. The importance of appreciating that overlap. And some of the things you mentioned, yes, there are Christians for whom the overlap is greater, and there are Christians for whom the overlap is smaller. So for me, my goal is to engage people wherever they are, wherever that overlap is. For some, the overlap is just, we both believe in the God of Genesis, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the Exodus, the God of Sinai, and there it ends. And for others, it moves beyond that. So wherever people are, I believe that this is an important reconciliation after thousands of years. Again, from a Jewish perspective, if we're going to build the kingdom of God, if we are going to have a house of prayer for all nations, that means that we're worshiping together. That means that we're in the same house of prayer. That when I go to the temple to bring an offering, when we rebuild that temple, the person behind me in line or in front of me in line could very well be a Christian who's also there to serve the same God and bring an offering in that same temple. And this is a perspective that I believe it's important for Jews and Christians to have. When I travel, by the way, I often find myself speaking in synagogues as well. The bridge building has to happen both ways. So besides speaking to Christians and sensitizing them and building a relationship for them with the Jewish people, I'm also speaking to my fellow Jews and telling them what's going on in the Christian world, because they have, just as many Christians have misconceptions about Jews because they haven't engaged that relationship, the same is true on the Jewish side. They don't know about all these exciting changes and the way the Christian world is beginning to engage the Hebrew roots of Christianity and the relationship with the people of Israel.
I mean, one of the interesting things, Pesach, is that when you look from the Christian point of view, the early church, they only had the Torah, they only had the Old Testament, and Jesus only taught from the Torah and the Old Testament, and so this is and the fact that he was Jewish, there was Shabbat, and there was all sorts of things that we're only just at this stage in history starting to wake up to, that his whole background. So what do people want you to speak about when you go to different places? Is it a common kind of theme?
Well, it really depends on what you mentioned before. It depends on where they are in the process of this relationship. So sometimes they just really want me to talk about Israel and engage in the relationship, and there I'll talk about the prophecies of the return and the prophecies of God's covenant with the people of Israel, and showing how they've been fulfilled. And at the same time as this excites people, it also challenges them. And then usually we'll open it up for questions and discuss, but sometimes just even meeting someone, talking. But quite often I'll speak about something that has nothing to do with the relationship, but is really just something shared. For example, I've given talks about the definition of love in the Bible, the definition of marriage in the Bible. Or just sometimes in some churches I've gone to, we'll just do a Bible study. We'll study a chapter of Psalms together. And to me, that actually builds the relationship in a much deeper way. If you think about any relationship, think about a marriage. When do you find yourself talking about the relationship? Usually that's when there's some trouble going on. Maybe you're in counseling. Most of the time in your relationship, if the relationship is healthy, you're not talking about the relationship. You're just having a relationship. You're doing things together. You're sharing experiences. So what I find is that whenever I offer a church, someone will contact me and say, "Oh, we'd love for you to come and speak. What are the options?" I'll always say to them, my preference is to do a Bible study, or to speak about a common concern, like one of the values that's under attack in the modern world. And when they say yes, when we do that, we're living in that overlap. When I talked about the overlap of values, we're spending time in that overlap. And then when we're done, when the discussion about the relationship happens, it happens in a different way. Because we've already shared something together. We've already looked at each other and discussed a shared concern, coming at it as as partners and as people who share that concern. So then when the discussion about the differences takes place, it takes place in the context of a relationship. So that's my preference, but it really depends on the environment. It depends on the people sitting in front of me. When I speak to younger Christians, when I go to the college campuses, it's also a little bit different. They tend to be much more influenced by the media and the general media's approach to Israel, even as they are religious Christians. So it presents different challenges. But this is my calling. This is what we're doing, and hopefully, having an effect, changing people's perspectives.
If you'd like to contact the organization and get in touch with you, they can do that at
cjcuc.com. cjcuc.com.
Do you think that one of the differences between, because we were talking that you're in the yeshiva environment, where the students would be used to just interrupting, you'd be speaking and they would be happy to just shout out something. Yeah. Whereas in the Christian community, we're more used to people speaking and nobody says until the end of the...
It is definitely a cultural difference. In a yeshiva, if you walk into a study hall, it's as noisy as the floor of the stock exchange. Wow. It's because everyone's arguing and discussing things, and there's a healthy din in the room. And when you walk into a library on a university campus, it's usually dead silent. So there's definitely a cultural difference. When we study, it's always with a partner or with a group, and it involves debate.
Yeah, I think this is one thing we perhaps don't understand in the Christian community is when we say argue, we're not saying that it's like so fiery.
It's not negative, yeah.
Right.
It's not negative.
It's a positive, it's to get to the depths of what's being put forward and discussed, and we argue to get to that rather than in a negative way.
It's like sharpening, sharpening the sword. It happens, there has to be that grinding and that tension. And it's all coming from a place of love of God. God gave us His Word, and we look at it and say, okay, He gave us His Word, and He told us to apply it to this world. And the world's a complicated place, and all of these debates and all of these discussions, this gets into a much larger topic about what we're doing with, with the oral law, the rabbinic law, the cliche that Christians listen to God and Jews listen to their rabbis, which I've heard from Christians, is so incorrect. It's one of these stereotypes from the other side, because the way we view it, and I understand the Christian view of seeing Scripture is the Word of God, and we don't want this intermediary of the doctrines of men. But for Jews, we view it differently. We view it that God gave us His Word and said, okay, now you figure out how to apply it to this world in all of its details, and the world is constantly changing. And therefore, all those debates, when you go into a yeshiva setting and you see them, everyone's yelling at each other and discussing things and all these rabbinic books, it's all really figuring out, how does God want us to apply His Word to this world? And in every generation that has to be reassessed and worked out again, and taking into account what the needs are in that generation and with those changes. And that's really what we're having all those arguments about. It's been going on for thousands of years, and hopefully it'll be going on for thousands more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming across today.
Thank you.
And joining us as a guest on the Israel First television program. And I'm sure that people will be very interested to contact you and get in touch about so watch your mailbox. Thank you so much for joining us today on Israel First television program. Don't forget you can email us at info@israelfirst.org. Visit the website www.israelfirst.org. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.
Okay, wonderful. Today we are looking at the fifth letter of the Aleph Bet. We look at Aleph Bet and Gimel Dalet, and now we are looking at the letter He. And the sound He is a light exhalation of breath. And if you remember, there is in the Psalm 33, verse 6, let us read it together. It's written, by the word of Adonai, the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth, all their host. So the letter He has a power, which is very interesting, because if you look at the name of Abram, it's been changed into Abraham when God was speaking to him about his vocation. And this is written in Genesis 17, 5 is written, no longer you will be called Abram, your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. Abraham was very special because he was living among idolaters, and he was the first who was recognizing after the Tower of Babel that God, our creator of heaven and earth, was his father. He is the father of our faith. We can see also in very practical thing, the letter He is like used when we speak Hebrew here day by day, like it means like the man. So it's like Ha-ish. And if it was just a man, it's just ish. So also for a woman, it's like Isha for a woman. But if it's the woman, it will be Ha-isha. And like you have Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year. And so all the time that you use the letter Ha is the definite pronoun in Hebrew. Okay? So this is exciting. We're coming into the Messianic era, which is when the kingdom comes. It's like all preparation, and the Hebrew language is preparation to go into that and dig together into the Torah and the Bible. So today we look at the 5th letter in the alphabet, which is the letter He, and we'll carry on next time. See you. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us, Rabbi Pesach Wolicki, on the program today on the Israel First. Don't forget, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.